What are we discussing on today's Locked On Diamondbacks podcast? Does Roki Sasaki control the balance of power in the NL West? And discussing the worst contracts at every position in the NL West.
You are Locked On Diamondbacks, your daily Arizona Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Listening to who? The always charismatic host of this podcast, Millard Thomas, multimedia journalist and a graphic designer. So please go check out my website, MillardThomas24.myportfolio.com. On there you can see all my latest work, from my packages to my articles to my photos and my graphic design. If you want to see more content by me, please follow me on Twitter at CareerThomas24 for my personal account, or look up Locked On Diamondbacks, both Twitter and Instagram, for the podcast handle. On today's show, we're discussing more Roki Sasaki and discussing if he controls the balance of power in the NL West. And let's also discuss the worst contract at every position in the NL West. I want to do a little exercise so we can see how teams in our division spend their money and who's the worst at spending their money. So a whole bunch I want to talk to you guys about today. Thank you for making Locked On Diamondbacks your first listen every day. I would not be able to do this podcast without you, my loyal listeners, sharing, subscribing, reviewing, doing all that so I could do this podcast for you. Thank you. It's free. It's available on all platforms, so please continue to tell your friends. And one of those platforms is YouTube. Please hit subscribe to Locked On Diamondbacks on YouTube. But now let's get into the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast, and let's discuss Roki Sasaki once again, because we talked about him a little bit on yesterday's podcast about how he seemed to be on a collision course for the NL West, and that is only creeping closer to that possibility because Roki has narrowed it down to 3 teams, 2 of which are in the NL West, of course, that being the LA Dodgers, the San Diego Padres. Allegedly had another meeting Tuesday. They included Dodgers, the front office and players. Previously in meetings, Roki was big on not having any players at any of his meetings. Now they're bringing in Dodgers players for the second meeting and the third meeting and stuff like that. So things are heating up in the Roki Sasaki market. Still feels like the Dodgers are probably the favorite, but also people are reporting at the same time that Roki does not really want to play for a big market, does not really want to be in like a major spotlight or on a grand stage. And so the idea of him going to the Dodgers, but also wanting that, seems kind of contradictory. So we'll see what happens. But right now, Roki Sasaki holds all the cards, and he holds kind of the balance of power in the National League West. Whatever Roki Sasaki decides to do is going to have reverberations for the D-backs, not only for this season, but for the seasons to come, because of how good Roki Sasaki is. Acquiring him means you may get the best pitcher in your rotation. Like, even the Dodgers with that loaded rotation, Roki still might be the best. D-backs, even with Gallen, Kelly, and Burns, Roki still might be the best. Even the Padres with Darvish and Cease and Michael King, like, Roki still might be the best. And the fact that he's in his mid-20s, the fact that he's going to be signed to an amateur deal, like, he checks all the boxes of talent, cheapness. It's like whoever signs Roki and is able to have him on their roster for the next few seasons at dirt money while he's producing like a top 5 pitcher in the sport, like, that's a major asset to add to your team. And that's why he's so important, so critical to what's going to happen this offseason, because he's directly going to affect these National League West teams. And I believe whatever team he signs or doesn't sign with could really swing the balance of power in the division. Let's say he goes to the San Diego Padres. You look at that team, and right now they don't feel that strong, but you add Roki into the mix, and the Padres feel like once again they have solidified themselves as one of the best teams in the NL West. Right now, they got some free agents out there, right? Tanner Scott, the Ha-Seong Kims, the Profars. Like, they're definitely good pieces that they have out there on the open free agent market, where if they brought them back, would be critical for their team. But none of them are as good as Roki Sasaki. And if you added Roki with a Dylan Cease, with a Michael King, with a Yu Darvish as the top 4 in your rotation entering next season, the Padres all of a sudden for 2025 and beyond, for maybe at least the next couple seasons after that, should be in play for the playoffs and maybe even more, right? Yes, they have, some questionable decisions when it comes to how they've spent money the last few off seasons and regular seasons, and we'll discuss that in segments number 2 and number 3. But you add Roki to this very expensive mix, and you will have a chance to compete at a really high level. You look at the LA Dodgers, and of course, we know how good they are coming off the World Series already, right? But you sign Roki Sasaki, that is the most loaded rotation of all time. Ohtani, Snell, Glasnow, Yamamoto, Roki Sasaki. How do you contend with a rotation like that? Ohtani could still be the number 1, number 2 starter in any rotation in Major League Baseball, and he might be on the outside looking in of a potential playoff rotation just because you want to keep him healthy for the playoffs as a batter. And so if Roki goes to the Dodgers, think about that roster, think about that rotation, think about Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman, the Snells, the Glasnows, the Yamamotos. They're all locked in, going to be there the next few seasons. If the Dodgers get Roki, now they have this young stud. You can maybe trade away one of those older, more expensive players. Maybe you want to get off of a Glasnow. Maybe you want to trade a Blake Snell. Still got guys like Tony Gonsolin. The Dodgers all of a sudden will have all these assets and moves that they'll also be able to trade off to improve their team if they add a Roki. Then let's say Roki doesn't sign with either franchise. Let's say he goes to Toronto. That would be huge for the D-backs. Dodgers will still be the cream of the crop, but all of a sudden, D-backs would probably feel pretty secure as the second best team in the NL West. If you look at the Padres, and if they don't sign Roki Sasaki, they can still compete in 2025, but after that, it gets pretty dicey for the Padres because you just look at 2025, Dylan Cease, Michael King, both pending free agents. Cease is going to get a major contract next offseason. The Padres probably are not going to pay or pony up the money for Dylan Cease. Michael King, we'll see what he gets. He's coming off a great season with San Diego. We could definitely demand some more money. And then not just that, Musgrove is missing the entire 2025 season with Tommy John. How will he look in 2026? Yu Darvish is 38, 39 years old. He's definitely on the back end of his career. By the time you get to 26, 27, if there's no Roki Sasaki, Musgrove, Darvish, Cease, and King could either be washed, not productive, or just be flat out of this rotation 2 years from now. So that's why Roki is so important for the Padres for next season and moving forward. And so if Roki doesn't sign with LA or San Diego and goes to Toronto, D-backs right there in the mix. Dodgers still the division favorite, but D-backs definitely feel like the best team in the NL West if Roki does not sign with one of these divisional opponents. And so right now, Roki Sasaki, he holds all the cards. We're all waiting for his decision. Is it Toronto? Is it the Padres? Is it the Dodgers? But whatever he chooses is going to have major reverberations for not just this season, but the next few seasons in the NL West. Now I want to discuss who's the best and worst teams at spending their money. We'll discuss that in segment number 2. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up the W. I love betting on which players will score a touchdown and how many points each team will score. It's thrilling. My favorite thing to do on the FanDuel Sportsbook app is the same game parlay. When I see that Arizona Cardinals are playing, sometimes I like to do a little Cardinals money line. Give me a little James Conner over on rushing touchdowns, and give me Kyler Murray anytime touchdown. When that 3-leg hits, it brings a big smile to my face. So if you want a big smile on your face, just visit fanduel.com to join today. That's fanduel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more at FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right. Let's get back into the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast. Let's discuss the worst contracts in the NL West. This is a little exercise and segment that was inspired kind of by the San Francisco Giants because they've had an interesting offseason. And after seeing them sign Justin Verlander, which I did not mind, I still think Verlander can be a very good pitcher even at his advanced age. I just thought $15 million with all these escalators depending on his performance, plus a full no trade clause was a little crazy. But the Giants are kind of in the business now where, despite being the San Francisco Giants, still probably feel like your premier franchise, a big market team. They have to go out there and overspend on free agents if they want to bring players into their building. So I want to do this little exercise so we could go. We're going to build a roster here of the most expensive players in the NL West. From first base to your starting rotation, we're going to build a team of the most expensive, worst contract at every position. And then at the end, we're going to see which team spends their money the worst by seeing who has the most players on the diamond in this fake exercise. And so we're going to start with our first baseman. I believe the first baseman on the worst contract in the NL West is Jake Cronenworth, making $12 million a year for 6 more seasons. Now, I don't think that's that bad of a contract, but for the purpose of this exercise, there really wasn't anyone else. Freddie Freeman, I'm not going to put on this list. Josh Naylor's a pending free agent. The Rockies really don't have anyone that you put on here. The Giants really, I think it's like Tyler Fitzgerald, or I can't even remember who their first baseman is. Whoever it is not someone expensive, right? And so you look at Jake Cronenworth, was an all-star in 2022, probably should have been an all-star back then, showed you how bad second base was, and then since then has been a below 2-win player. Jake Cronenworth, the contract's probably fine, but still, I still don't know if he's even worth $12 million a year with how he's produced offensively the last couple of years. So right now, Jake Cronenworth is the worst first baseman based on his contract in the NL West. Second base, this guy surprisingly in 2024 played more games at second than at shortstop, so he's now eligible for this position. Xander Bogaerts, he's getting $25 million a year for 9 more seasons. The D-backs at the time of his offseason seemed to be very in on Bogaerts. I remember the reporting saying the D-backs were potentially a finalist, all in on Bogaerts. Growing up as a Red Sox fan, I wanted Bogey on the D-backs. We have that D-backs to Boston connection with the Torrey, the Mike Hazen. I thought it made a lot of sense. He was coming off a 5.9 WAR season, according to Baseball Reference, the second highest of his career. Yes, the power was diminishing, but still the numbers across the board were super strong. Finished 9th in MVP voting, Silver Slugger in 2022, goes to the Padres. First year, definitely not as good as you want, but still a 790 OPS, 285 average, basically a 2020 guy, still a 4.5 WAR season, like definitely solid. But this year, the bottom completely fell out for Bogaerts. And the fact that he's doing that in year 2 at age 31, it's not like it's year 6 of the deal where he's 36 years old. This is year 2 of a deal that paid him 11 for 280, and he still got 9 more seasons at $25 million a year. Bogaerts, I love you, but sadly, you have the worst contract at second base in the NL West. How about shortstop? Again, some of this stuff is just based on how much these teams had to pay to acquire these players, because maybe it's the market size, like the next guy. Because I do like the guy at shortstop, but I can't help but feel that he's a little overpaid. Willy Adames by the San Francisco Giants. I love Willie, and I actually like that move by the Giants when they signed him, because I do think Willy Adames is a good player. They said he has like the most home runs, I think, at shortstop, like the last 3 seasons. He's been like the OPS is probably a little bit more disappointing than you want, but in terms of RBI production, power production, he's right there. But for a guy that's going to bat 240 with like a 750, 730, 740 OPS, like I don't know if I want to pay that guy $31 million a year for the next 7 seasons. Like that's what Willy Adames is getting. Is he a great defender? Is he a great power guy? Can he produce in the middle of your lineup? Yes, yes, and yes. They finished 10th in MVP voting last year. Yes, he did. But do I want to pay Willie Adames $31 million a year for 7 more seasons for a guy who last year had like his best batting slash line since 2021, and it was a 251 average and a 794 OPS? Is that constituting $31 million a year? I'm not too sure. So even though I like the player going to San Francisco, I still don't like the price tag. Willie, too expensive for my blood. Because you look at the D-backs, Geraldo Perdomo, you're not going to put them up there, right? Some of the other teams around the NL West just don't really have that expensive a shortstop, especially when you see Xander Bogaerts qualifies at second base. Third base, I had 2 players listed at this one. The first guy I had, I'm going to put him in my honorable mention. We'll discuss him later because it got swapped out for this guy who I didn't think I was going to put on here, but Manny Machado. I think he's better than the guy that I have as an honorable mention, who we'll discuss later. But the problem with Manny Machado from the year 2027, so 2 years from now till the year 2033, Manny Machado is going to get $39 million a year. $39 million a year. That is a massive, massive deal for Machado, who I still think is good, but last 2 seasons has finished with a below 800 OPS, has been a 3-win player the last 2 years. Like, if you're giving me the guy in 2022 that was almost a 7-win guy, finished second MVP voting, like, sure. But the guy the last 2 seasons, despite the home runs and the RBIs being there, the overall impact defensively, maybe the slugging, like, it just doesn't feel as impactful as it did 2 years ago as it did the last 2 seasons. So Manny Machado, the fact at age 33 is going to start getting $39 million a year for like 6-7 more seasons seems absolutely crazy, but I guess the San Diego Padres had to do it. How about our outfield? I got 3 outfield spots. The first one I want to discuss, Jung-Ho Lee. We haven't really seen him, but Jung-Ho Lee is making about $22 million a year from the years 2026 to the year 2029. And at the time when Jung-Ho Lee was signed, it was an overpay because you looked at what the market value was for Jung-Ho Lee. It was like a third. It was like a half of what he signed for. And of course, he only played 37 games last year, but in the 37 games, it's not like he tore the cover off the ball. Not like he impressed greatly. Like, Jung-Ho Lee needs to immediately come back and be good and be effective for the Giants next year. Like, they have major investment in Jung-Ho Lee, and even his numbers back when he was in Japan, like, he was a good hitter, but he still didn't display like power. Like, there was definitely flaws in his game even when he was overseas. And so that's why it was so surprising for him to get that big contract, because of the obvious flaws and risks in his game. So I think Jung-Ho Lee at $22 million a year from the years 26 to 2029, I think he's probably an overpay. Chris Bryant, definitely an overpay for the Colorado Rockies, making $27 million a year for the next 4 seasons. And this is a guy who's barely played since coming over to Colorado. He played 42 games his first year, 80 games his next year, and then 37 games this past year. He's got a negative 1.3 WAR during his time in Colorado. He was good in 2022 in those 42 games, but since then, he's been absolutely horrendous and still makes no sense why the Rockies even signed Chris Bryant at the time of their deal. Then the last player we'll talk about before we get into the pitchers and some honorable mentions in segment number 3. In my outfield, how about Tommy Edman? Maybe you guys disagree. Maybe you think it should be someone else, like, I don't know, with Teoscar Hernandez. I already got Chris Bryant in my list. Like, Tommy Edman is making $15 million a year for the next 5 seasons. And to be honest, I think he's one of the most overrated players in Major League Baseball. Can he play good defense? Does he have speed? Yes, but he's also a guy who, you look at the last few seasons offensively, you look at his career offensively, and really outside of his rookie season where he had a 3.9 WAR, I don't think Tommy Edman has been all that. I know he put up a 6.2 WAR in 2022, but I think it was greatly carried by his defense. I don't know if his defense is good enough for me to give him $15 million a year to be my 4th outfielder on the LA Dodgers. I feel like that's kind of crazy just a little bit. So I'll put Tommy Edman also as one of the worst contracts in the NL West. Now we'll talk about some of the pitchers and their contracts and how bad they are in the National League West in segment number 3. And if you're looking to buy tickets to an upcoming sport or an event, then the best place to do that, of course, is going to be Game Times, because Game Time is the best place for last minute deals on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. They have this feature called all in pricing. When you toggle this feature on, it shows you your total cost upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. You could get a panoramic view from your seat before you buy. They also have the lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. All right. Let's get back into the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast, and let's continue discussing the worst contracts in the NL West. At first base, we put Cronenworth, second Bogey, shortstop Willie Thomas, third Manny Machado, 3 outfield spots, Jung-Ho Lee, Chris Bryant, Tommy Edman. I didn't put a catcher because, be honest, I don't want to just do it for the sake of doing it for the exercise. Gabriel Moreno is still like arbitration. The Giants have like a young guy. The Padres have like some cheap guy. The Dodgers have Will Smith, who's making like $50 million a year. He's like the second best catcher in the Major League Baseball. Like, there's no bad catcher contracts right now. There's also like no bad reliever contracts. If you want to throw out a bad reliever contract, maybe it's Yuki Matsui on the Padres, who's making like $5 million a year for the next 4 seasons. Like, there's not a guy who is like, he's like the only player in that National League West on a deal longer than 2 years in any bullpen. So catcher and bullpen guys, I don't think there's a bad deal. But starters, the rotation, we can fill out a full rotation right now with bad contracts in the NL West. This is not in any particular order. This is more like in the order of talent of how I'd probably stack my rotation. My number 1 starter, Tyler Glasnow. Is he a stud when he pitches? Yes, Tyler Glasnow is one of the best guys in Major League Baseball, but he's basically Jacob deGrom, a stud when he pitches, but the problem is it never seems like he's healthy, and he never seems to be on the mound. He hit his career high in innings pitches this past year with the Dodgers in 2024 at 134. 22 starts, the most starts he's ever made in his season. So I guess you can say he's improved in that area the last 2 years because he is trending in the right direction. Career high innings pitch in 2023, 120, and then another career high in 2024 at 134. So at least Tyler Glasnow's trending in the right direction. 3 years left at $30 million a year. Yes, he's super talented. It's just the fact that he does not play enough for me. And at $30 million, I'm going to need that guy to play all the time. Robbie Ray, kind of like Glasnow, but maybe less talented. He's owed 2 more years at $25 million a year. And again, Robbie Ray, his issue the last couple of seasons has also been straight up health. He hasn't been healthy enough. He made 32 starts in 2022. Then I believe he got Tommy John, missed most of 2023, only had 1 start, and then missed a lot of 2024 as well. Only made 7 starts last year. We're not going to look at his numbers and blame him for what he did last year coming off Tommy John. I mean, to be honest, some of the numbers were encouraging. Still 12.6 strikeouts per 9 in his 7 starts. Robbie Ray could be a major impact bounce back player for the Giants next year. But because we don't know fully how he's going to look next year, and the fact that he's still making $25 million a year for the next 2 years, that's still a very expensive contract. Because of the risk built in with Robbie Ray, I'm going to put him on my list. Yu Darvish is also on my list because he's old. He's like 39 years old. He's going to be making about $17 million a year for the next 4 seasons. I like Yu Darvish, but I thought he was kind of cooked like a couple years ago. He's definitely made more of an impact. He was bad in 2023. Last year, he was very good in 2024, but that's kind of where he is. You look at his last 4 seasons, and in half of them, he has an ERA north of 4. And the other half, he has an ERA south of 4, right? But last year, he also only made 81 innings pitched. The season before, 136 innings pitched. Like, the production starting to go down. The health is starting to go down. He's going to be 38 years old next season. Like, that guy getting paid about $17 million until he's like 42 years old, like, not the best investment in Major League Baseball. Finally got a D-back on this list, Eduardo Rodriguez, making about $20 million a year for the next 4 seasons, coming off an already disastrous first year with Arizona. And we know Erod also is a guy who doesn't have the best health. Like, he's another one of these really talented guys when he pitches, but also just never seems to pitch enough. Made 10 starts last year, 26 starts the year before, and then 17 starts the year prior to that. If we can get a healthy Erod, like, yeah, that guy can be good. But Erod is also a high variance pitcher. One season, he's a 3.3 guy. Next season, he's a 4.2 guy. So what version of Erod will the D-backs get next season? That is a great question. So far, that's my top 4 in my rotation. And I'm going to round it out with a Colorado Rocky. Give me a little Kyle Freeland. $17 million a year for the next 3 seasons. I'm not a Kyle Freeland guy. And Rocky fans would push back and say, oh, it's because he's in Coors Field. Guess what, guys? I looked at the numbers. In 2022, when he was really good for the Rockies, you could definitely say it was either 22 or 21. Whatever season he was really good with the Rockies. I'll just look it up real quick. How about that? Because whatever season most recently he was really good for the Rockies, you could have looked at the home or away splits and been accurate in his assessment that he was really good on the road and then really bad at home. This is the year of 2021, I believe. Either 21 22. I don't even care at this point. Bottom line is, you look at the numbers the last 2 years for Kyle Freeland, and you cannot use that argument. He has been atrocious at home, and he's been even worse on the road. He was like a 4.5 ERA guy at home last year, and then like a 6 ERA guy on the road. And so you can't just use Coors Field as an excuse anymore. I feel like Rockies fans always do that. No, Hermain Marquez, Kyle Freeland, Austin Gomber, they're not that bad. They just pitch in Coors Field. Yes, Coors Field sucks for pitchers, but also those guys are not very good at all. And that's the bottom line with those dudes. So my rotation would be Tyler Glasnow, Robbie Ray, Yu Darvish, Erod, and Kyle Freeland for the worst contracts for among starting pitchers in the NL West. And then a couple of honorable mentions. Matt Chapman, as I always say, $25 million a year for 6 more seasons. I just think Manny Machado making $39 million a year for 7 seasons from 2027 to 2033 is probably a little bit worse, even though he's a better player, I think, than Matt Chapman. And also Joe Musgrove's making $20 million a year for the next 3 seasons. He's missing all of next year with Tommy John. So maybe you want to put him in the rotation and swap somebody else out, but that's where I have Joe Musgrove right now. And that's how I believe the worst contracts at every position in the NL West should go. And so if you actually look at the breakdown, I put one D-back on this list, and I don't think that's biased at all. When looking at the D-backs contract status and situation, the most expensive guy they have now is Corbin Burns, but that's not a bad deal like we've discussed. I think the Burns deal is better than the Blake Snell deal or the Max Fried deal. Go listen to my rationale on an earlier podcast from a couple of weeks ago. And then the rest of the roster, like Erod is the only guy. Jordan Montgomery, I guess we don't trade him too, but he's a pending free agent. I don't care about that. Like, Erod is the only guy who's a bad contract on the D-backs and really one of the only expensive players on the D-backs. The Dodgers I put down too, because can you call Ohtani a bad contract despite getting $700 million? No, like, all of it's deferred. Like, most of their contracts are expensive, but it's like, until Mookie Betts slow down, I'm not going to be upset. He's making $35 million a year for the next 7 seasons. Like, he seems like a guy who's going to be a Hall of Fame MVP type guy for his entire career. Freddie Freeman's still a stud. Like, most of those guys are studs in the middle of their prime. The Rockies, I did put 2 down, but again, it's not like they're getting these big time free agents that they can even overpay and put on terrible contracts. So they're not even really in the discussion to be a part of it. So it really comes down to the Padres and the Giants. And I thought when doing this exercise, I was going to have more Giants than Padres. And it really came down to third base, Matt Chapman versus Manny Machado. And because of that, the Padres have 4 terrible contracts and the Giants have 3. I think it makes sense that those 2 teams are at the top because the Padres have felt like the most aggressive team the last 3-4 offseason, regular seasons, making trades left and right. Yu Darvish, Juan Soto, Manny Machado, Xander Bogaerts. Here's more money, Tatis. Here's more money, Yu Darvish. Let's go get Luis Ariz. Like, they're always keeping a head on a swivel, always shelling out money left and right. So I don't think it's a surprise that the Padres have probably the most bad contracts in the NL West. I don't think it's a surprise the Giants are second because they feel like a franchise that's now in the mode where We have to overpay free agents if we want them to come to San Francisco. I didn't like the Jorge Soler, Conforto, JD Davis. Didn't like the Matt Chapman deal. I don't mind the Willie Adames deal despite him being overpaid, but that's where the Giants are now as a franchise. If they want guys, they have to overpay for them. So it's not a surprise to see the Padres and the Giants at the top of the NL West list of worst contracts in their division. Now that's it for this edition of the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. Come back on Thursday or Friday for more Diamondbacks news coverage and insight. And as always, stay safe, stay healthy. Dose.